Hello and welcome. My name is Narelle Doan, and I am the Director of Marketing for Viking Pure Solutions. And thank you for joining us this afternoon for taking the scary out of behavioral variant FTD, what senior living teams need to know. This is a topic that can feel overwhelming, especially for caregivers navigating behaviors that are often misunderstood. But our goal today is to bring clarity, confidence, and practical support to the work you do every day. At Viking Pure Solutions, we believe that supporting senior living teams goes beyond removing toxic chemicals and providing safer solutions. It's about helping create environments where both residents and caregivers can thrive. And that is why we're proud to host this conversation and ones like it. And I'm so glad to welcome Cole and Michelle and Courtney from Brightview Senior Living to share their expertise with us today. We will be taking questions at the end, so please feel free to drop those in the Q&A section or in the chat. And before we get into the discussion, let's start with a little bit of background on our panelists. Cole, do you want to kick us off with a little intro?
Absolutely. Thank you all for being here. Before I share the special guest we have today, just wanted to share when we were thinking of a name for this presentation, we bounced around a lot of ideas. And when we say scary, we're not talking about the person, we're not talking about the type of dementia, we're more talking about the journey to getting a diagnosis. And the reason this can feel scary is most dementias start with memory loss as the first symptom. With a frontotemporal dementia, it's the most common form of dementia for people under 60. So people are younger, they're more physically healthy, which can make getting a diagnosis or tracking down, trying to get the diagnosis a little bit more complicated. But we know that knowledge is power, and we hope to equip you with some knowledge today that'll take that scary out of frontotemporal dementia. I'm the corporate director of care and cognitive wellness for Brightview Senior Living. And joining me today, I'm so excited to introduce you to Courtney Wolf. She is a gerontologist and regional director of care and cognitive wellness at Brightview Senior Living. And then Michelle Godfrey. She is a nurse, a caregiver, and our senior Wellspring Village director at Brightview Senior Living, Crofton. Uh, we can go to the next slide. So just some objectives for today. What we want you to take away is that today isn't about having all the answers or fixing everything. It's about understanding what's happening, making sense of behaviors that can feel confusing or even hurtful, and giving a few practical tools that you can use in real moments. We're going to do all this through storytelling. Next slide. So, what is frontotemporal dementia? It's a progressive brain disease affecting the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain. What happens is abnormal proteins, tau, like we see in Alzheimer's disease, build up in our frontal lobe and our temporal lobe. When those abnormal proteins build up, it causes those cells to die, and the brain in those areas actually atrophies, so it will shrink. Why is it a challenge? Well, because these two lobes are responsible for some very important things. Our frontal lobe, that's our decision making, personality, judgment, behavior. Um, and then our temporal lobe, our language, our ability to understand language, our ability to use language, and also our emotional understanding. Memory is not affected until way later in frontotemporal dementia. Next slide. So with frontotemporal dementia, there are three main types. A couple of the types, both the semantic variant and the non-fluent agrammatic, affect language more than they affect other areas, or sorry, other symptoms. And then there are some more rare ones that affect motor skills, but the one that affects most people, the most common type of frontotemporal dementia is the behavioral variant, and it makes up a little over half of all FTD diagnoses. If you think about Bruce Willis, a famous actor, you may remember that prior to his diagnosis with frontotemporal dementia, about several months before that broke in the news, They initially diagnosed him with primary progressive aphasia. So his language was affected primarily in the beginning. Typically, we talk about the different types of FTD based on which symptoms appear first. Uh, so FTD is often misdiagnosed as a psychiatric condition or a movement disorder because we aren't typically looking at younger, healthy-minded people that don't have memory challenges as potentially having a type of dementia. So who's affected? It's age-related, so our chance of developing frontotemporal dementia increases as we get older, but it's typically diagnosed much younger than an Alzheimer's disease or related dementia, typically diagnosed between 50 and 80. Affects men and women equally, but the type of frontotemporal degeneration or dementia that they experience will be different. Men typically have the behavioral variant, whereas women typically experience the ones that affect language. Next slide. So what does this mean for us? First, these are symptoms of brain change, not intentional actions. I think it's very important for us to remember people living with frontotemporal dementia, they're not giving us a hard time. They're actually having a hard time. Parts of their brain are shrinking. So what are some behavioral changes that we see? They lose their social filter. So that filter that helps us say, ooh, maybe this isn't the right setting to say that goes out the window. So our loved one or our resident or the person living with frontotemporal degeneration may say or do things that we consider inappropriate or inappropriate in social settings. They may lack motivation or lose interest in things that were very important to them. They may have apathy where they don't have the ability to initiate and get started on tasks. We see some impulsivity challenges where they may be spending money without regard to thinking about bills and household responsibilities. Emotional changes that occur with frontotemporal dementia. You see being able to understand how others are feeling becomes reduced. We call that a reduced empathy, being able to understand and feel what others may be feeling. We also may have difficulty recognizing others' feelings or how to respond. There are some changes that occur in thinking, so poor judgment. We may be spending more money, engaging in risky behaviors like gambling, affairs, things that it's not the person's fault. Their brain is truly changing, but these things are totally different than who the person was prior to frontotemporal dementia. And I am going to turn it over to Michelle to actually bring this to life through sharing a story of a person she cared for named Mark.
So I was really excited when Cole came to me to think about a resident I could talk about because the first person that came to my mind was Mark, who was a very special resident I had the privilege of taking care of. Some of Mark's backstory is that Mark and Kim, who is his wife, were high school sweethearts. They built a life together. They raised two children and had two grandchildren. He was the vice president of operations at a satellite company. He was 52 when he first began showing signs of confusion in 2012. His employer asked him to take a step back from his high stress position, and he began working from home. With Mark at home more, Kim soon realized that the issues at work were due to poor job performance and needed further investigation and to figure out why. Kim was very desperate to find some other reason other than frontotemporal dementia or any form of dementia, and she actually took him to over 20 different doctors trying to find a reason. Um, he was finally diagnosed at age 56 with frontotemporal dementia, and at age 57 moved into our memory care community. So for Mark's journey, some of the ways frontotemporal dementia showed up was the declining job performance we already discussed. Um, he relied on written instructions for everything, and this picture is actually a picture from his home. He had post-it notes everywhere, reminding him of every password, everywhere he needed to look to find things, step-by-step instructions how to figure out daily tasks that we would usually take for granted. He printed all of his emails due to memory loss. Kim actually took all these post-it notes and the emails and tried to organize them in a folder for him, but unfortunately, out of sight, out of mind. If these things weren't available to him with easy access, he just did not remember how to complete any of these daily tasks. Kim noticed he was getting lost while driving. He needed step-by-step navigation instructions on even familiar routes, and at one point was coming home from the dentist, which was only about a 5-minute drive from his home, and it got lost. Kim had to go out and find him. He had some impulsiveness, so there was a considerable amount of retirement from the retirement that went missing. I think it was tens and thousands of dollars that even to this day, I spoke with Kim a little while ago, they never figured out where that went. He was having difficulty finding words. In his head, the words he was saying made sense, but we weren't understanding him. So he would show some frustration when he was trying to talk to and communicate with people, and they weren't responding the way he expected them to. He became upset if a strict routine was not followed. This routine was so strict that one example I can give is Kim would line out his medication on a counter in the kitchen, and he would just come over and take it. One day she got out the dog's medication, and without skipping a beat, Mark just came over, picked up the pills, and swallowed them, and Kim was shocked. She didn't know what to do. He had some anxiety and fearfulness, and only would he show up with anger if the anxiety and fearfulness was mistaken for being aggressive. When we need to figure out his needs, and when the needs weren't met, like we say, any behavior is a form of communication. It's trying to state that there's something that he needs. So since he was unable to express the needs, that would show up as anger. And towards the end, due to not being able to communicate properly, sometimes he would just suddenly get up and start running. That led to frequent falls, which eventually had gait instability, and then he showed with dysphagia. So the interventions we used for Mark was to have that strict daily routine, just like he had at home. So the continuity between home and the community was very important. We would go through step-by-step instructions how Kim would complete tasks at home, and without any change, we're doing it in the community. Even as far as I had her show me the first time I was going to do a shower, she showed me exactly how they did it. If you didn't do the steps that he was used to at home in the same order in the memory care, you were never going to successfully complete the shower. Reassuring him constantly that he was safe, since fear and anxiety was a big issue with him, making sure he knew that we were there to take care of him and that we knew what to do to take care of him was very important. Keeping consistent caregivers through every stage is even more important. The caregivers that were there in the beginning knew what he liked, knew what calmed him down, and knew how to complete his care in the right order, so that when he declined later in the community and he couldn't communicate these things, or he wasn't responding the same way to those things, they still knew what he liked and what would keep him calm and safe. We learn how to communicate with somebody that could no longer use written and spoken word properly. So using his facial expressions and responding to that, responding to the emotion rather than the incorrect speech. It's really a great time to use your imagination and kind of think about what that resident is saying and how they're saying it to know how to respond to keep the conversation going. They become very upset and anxious if you just look at them and don't respond, or if you're responding and saying that you don't understand them, that can be pretty frustrating. If you think about you having a conversation with somebody and they're coming back and not understanding what you're saying, that just increases the anxiety and the frustration. My favorite part about working in memory care is that we get to come to work and make believe every day. Therapeutic fibbing is just that. It's not really a fib if we're telling the truth in their reality. So stepping into their reality, realizing that just because we're what would be considered lying to them, if it's making them feel better in that moment, that's the goal. That's all we're there to try to do, is make them happy and feel better in the moment they're in. We identify their triggers and find ways to prevent the behaviors from getting worse. With Mark, it was really important that we kept him in our line of sight, even if we're not one-on-one engaging with him, but having him in a way we could see his body language if he started pacing, so that we could stop him from getting more upset before everything escalated. One thing we all learned is that if he was holding his arms across his body, that he was cold. If he was tugging at his clothes, he was hot. If he started pacing, he just needed someone to go talk to him and de-escalate the situation. So providing redirection and comfort strategies. Reminiscence therapy worked really well with Mark. His room was filled with pictures and things that were provided comfort from home. So if what we had to do was bring him back to his apartment and just talk about his children in the pictures and the life he and Kim built, it was a great way to bring him back down. He really had a good way of mimicking things that we did. So breathing exercise worked really well with him. I would just look at him and say, copy me. I would plug one nostril and breathe in, and then plug the other nostril and breathe out. We would just sit there and do that until he realized he was recentered and ready to go back out to the common area. Music therapy was really fun with Mark. He was a lot younger than the other residents in the community, so we could play more 60s and 70s music, which sometimes was even more fun for us. And he loved that. Aromatherapy as well, so hand massages with calming scents and things like that was great. Work was a really important thing in his life, and recognizing that and providing individualized engagement was very important. We would print out paperwork. I would ask him to edit a paper for me, and he would mark things up and hand it back to me about an hour or two later. Even if what he didn't make sense, it was work and provided purposeful engagement for him. And his wife, Kim, was an amazing person. She was with us every evening feeding him, and really it was beneficial for her too to be there because we became a sense of support for Kim. Every night when she would come in, we were all excited to see her, and she got to talk about her day, the things that went well, the things that were frustrating her, and we really learned a lot about their family. So supporting Mark towards the end of his journey was very important because Mark was still Mark. This is where the continuity of the caregivers really came into play, like I said earlier. The caregivers knew Mark. They knew what he enjoyed. They knew what he loved. Right here's a picture of him with he had a dog named Hunter at home, and we put his dog's collar around Hunter's neck, and the mechanical dog that he has here, and he loved just petting Hunter and talking to him. He ended up having less behaviors. We watch a resident decline, and it's sad to see the decline, but there is also a slight blessing that comes along with it as well. With Mark in a chair, and we were able to keep him closer to the caregivers that made him feel safe, he felt more comfortable. We saw the behaviors decline, and he was happier in that situation at that moment. With the dysphagia that starts, we also have to do an altered diet. So he ended up having thickened liquids and a puree diet and needing more assistance with feeding. We still focused on the emotions that remained. Every time Kim came into the community, his face would light up. When you saw him interact with his favorite caregivers, again, his face would light up. So just being there and supporting him in those moments was an amazing opportunity that we had.
Thanks, Michelle. That was so many great examples of person-centered care, but thank you for all that you've done with Mark and sharing his story.
Absolutely.
So moving. So if we think about how Michelle and her team supported Mark, one of the biggest things was that they definitely anticipated his needs. So when you're working with somebody with FTD, you have to make sure that you take a minute to observe the environment, look for triggers, look for things that might be upsetting to them. I think in healthcare, one of the biggest things is shift change. Not great to do around our residents because it is so noisy and they can't control it. Another thing is definitely the temperature. Michelle was giving great examples about Mark's cues on whether he was hot or cold. But if you think about it, if you're unable to communicate your needs and you're really hot, you're going to get frustrated. So it makes sense that this could happen. Something else we really need to focus in on is that if something doesn't work, we're just not going to force it. We're going to recenter, reapproach, and keep the calm. So it really is our job to be the pulse of the neighborhood. We have to make sure that we're bringing in good energy and that we can calm, the chaos along the way. So this is a piece of our slides where we'd like a little bit of interaction. So if you would, bear with me, take yourself off mute and say, I'm sorry, you're right.
I'm
I,
sorry, you're right.
I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry,
you're
you're
right.
right. I don't know if our
Thank you.
participants can unmute for this, but
And that's okay. I
yeah.
appreciate those three. Really, it's just to show that we're all capable of saying this. It's a simple statement that has such a big impact. We might not understand what is trying to be communicated with us. So maybe we're taking a guess. We're looking at body language. We're picking up on some cues that are being put down, but we're going to be wrong some of the time. So just apologize, give them some space, and move through it. Another big tip is just to slow down, especially when you're working with multiple residents, is you have to give yourself a little bit of time in between. I know that days are jam-packed and that's hard to do sometimes, but we have to be able to stop the care with one resident, take a beat, and then move into care with somebody else because you can't bring that same energy from apartment to apartment or area to area because you're creating it. Um, Michelle was giving great examples about talking with the coworkers and making sure that this is a team effort. We have to communicate what's going well, what's not going well, things that we've tried that we want to keep going with, because it's so important to look at it as a team approach. We say it all the time. We're all in it together. It is truly a village effect.
Mhm.
So some common challenges, some of these are some takeaways that Cole had already discussed, but super important. We have to remember that their executive functioning is not working the same. So problem solving, multitasking, emotions, it's all much more challenging. So if you think about yourself and just multitasking, maybe you're listening to this right now and also your phone's going off and you're checking it and you're trying to keep both lines of communication open. That would be super challenging for somebody living with frontotemporal dementia. And since it's challenging and since it's something that they've done their whole life, it becomes frustrating, and that's fair. Another piece is apathy or disinterest in hobbies. This is usually a red flag when you're working with family members that like something has changed. Maybe they're not interested in their grandchildren anymore. They're not excited when they come over, or they used to do watercolors all the time and now they don't want to pick up the paintbrush at all. It's a huge change. It's not that they don't care about it anymore, it's that they're not showing the emotion towards it anymore. Another piece is compared to other dementias, memory can stay. So we're really focused on the feelings here, and it's less about redirection or distraction. You've got to meet them where they're at and stay right there in that moment with them. Language is obviously a challenge. Cole brought up Bruce Willis, which is such a great example, but they're going to have trouble finding the right words. Again, super frustrating. So how can we work around that? We always say it's, being the detective is I want to go home. Do you truly want to go home, or what does home mean to you? And home usually means safe. I want to feel safe. Okay, what does safety feel like for you? All important questions that maybe we're not going to know, but we can definitely get there. Inappropriate and social behavior. Their personal bubble is much, much smaller. So the filter is not there. They're usually a little bit more impulsive. Risky behavior shows up. I used to work with a gentleman that was in his late 40s, and it was so fun because we had a lot of the same jokes. We liked the same music, like you were saying. And it was great. We were working out throughout the day, but if he said a joke, I always knew when the punchline was coming, he was going to put me in a headlock. He would put me in a headlock every single time. And he's still laughing. He wasn't, trying to be aggressive. That was just his response. So once you understand the response, you can prepare for it. But it's just that was funny to him. Um, so we worked with it. Another piece is just a decline in routine. Michelle showed an example of that so well that they might lose their routine, but they are comfortable in a routine. So setting that up with Mark obviously worked super well. But it's also another red flag in a situation where you could see somebody that might be prim and proper, and now they look a little disheveled or they're wearing mismatched clothing. It's a red flag that something's going on. So how can we support someone living with FTD? Michelle gave so many great examples, but The main the main thought process is that you just kind of take a step back and create a calm environment. It is chaotic and it is challenging, absolutely. And it is sad, but there are so many ways that we can create calmness. We have to help them with their language, speak slowly, clearly, and wait for a response. I think the biggest takeaway is really that they need to be seen and heard just like everybody else. So maybe it's you pausing and not filling the space, which we all so often do. It might feel uncomfortable, but it gives them the chance to speak to you independently and with dignity. So we're not rushing the conversation, we're waiting for a dignified conversation with them. We love our physical therapist, OT, speech. This is definitely a time where we would want them to get involved to support movement and any challenges with that. You have to remember that with movement comes independence, and with independence comes self-esteem, which is a huge piece to just quality of life. So we definitely want to make sure we're supporting them along their journey. Anticipate. This is something Michelle and her team did so well, so many great examples. But to know their preference, this isn't so that you can answer for them. This is so that you can be proactive in a situation. I'm sure it wasn't like you did everything for Mark, but you knew what he did like. And just like you said, as he progressed through this journey, they were able to pick up on things that would make him feel more comfortable. And finally, connection matters. Try new things. We're just here to add life to days. It's not about saying no to everything or being scared about new experiences. It's figuring out what can we do together. There's a great story just within Brightview of a Wellspring Village director taking her team out who had people living with frontotemporal dementia to Topgolf. And when you think of Topgolf, you'd think, oh, that's kind of scary. They're up high, they have golf clubs, there's alcohol. It was the best event. It was a new experience for them. They had never been there. It was something that they remembered and talked about later. And like, what a cool experience to have. I say that in so many trainings, like there's so many of us that have never gone to Topgolf, but they did because it wasn't about no and the limitations. It was about what can they do.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Michelle and Courtney. I took a lot of good stuff away. I wrote down some notes. Michelle, just telling people to use their imagination. How beautiful. When you take away everything you've learned and just use your imagination, you're so much better at anticipating needs, knowing what people want and how to respond. And then, Courtney, focus on the feeling. When those words are being lost, you still have feeling. We still emote and we still share our emotions. So, really focus on the feeling is huge. And then meet them where they are and stay there. I think often we meet people where they are, we understand, but we don't stay there. We are
Move them along.
uncomfortable. This doesn't feel right. So sit there, stay there with them. And then I'd like to close first by thanking Michelle, Mark's care partner. Thank you for sharing his story. And Kim, Mark's wife, for allowing us to share his story so that others may learn from his journey. And I want to leave you with a final thought. This journey often asks us to hold on and let go at the same time. Hold on to the moments of connection, the essence of who your loved one is, and gently let go of expectations of who they used to be. I think that's huge. And through it all, remember that your presence, your care, and your patience is what matters most. So now I think we'll open it up for some questions.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple here. First up, folks are asking for the slides from today. If you guys wouldn't mind sending that to me, and I'll include that with the replay that I send at the end.
Absolutely.
And also any other helpful resources that you guys want to share. I'm sure folks would love that. And then from Shruti, we have, how can we ensure staff feels safe during times when the FTD resident may be feeling dysregulated? What body language cues through which can we can communicate that the FTD resident is safe with us even during a tough moment?
So, Michelle, I'd love to turn this over to you. The first thing I want to just share is let's think about behavior quickly. All behavior is a form of communication. So if there's what we might perceive as a negative behavioral expression, what we've got to hear is what you're doing is not working for me, or something in my environment needs to change. And a helpful hint, behavior will increase in frequency, duration, and intensity until the need is met. So if you think you have the need, I know Courtney loves chocolate ice cream. She's hungry for a snack. I've got her chocolate ice cream. She eats that and the behavior continues and increases in intensity, duration, or frequency. I didn't get the right underlying unmet need, so I can go back to the drawing board. But Michelle, how do you tell, especially someone that has FTD?
Uh,
The question was if to make sure the caregivers stay safe in a moment of de-escalation, correct?
And to help
Yes.
the resident feel
Okay.
safe when they're
Yeah.
dysregulated.
So I always tell my caregivers stay an arm's length at least away because you don't know when they're going to get upset and strike. So if you keep yourself at a safe distance, obviously always keep your back towards the exit of a room or apartment, so you can back up further and don't end up in a situation where you can't have that exit route. And to get the resident to be accepting of their assistance and care in a safe manner, reach the caregiver to reach their hand out first. So a resident that reaches back and is accepting their hand is more open and willing for that caregiver to assist them than one that's going to, let's say, smack their hand away or back up from that hand. You want to make sure the resident also feels safe because obviously they're terrified in that moment, probably more so than the actual caregiver. But really just staying a safe distance, working on that relationship. We had a resident recently move into memory care that had been in assisted living. It was very difficult to provide care to, but my team in memory care really, for a week, just provided a little bit more care, talked to the resident, and then went to the next step. And by the end of the week, my tiniest and one of them my best, but very small caregiver was able to complete this resident's entire shower when the whole year previously in assisted living, they were telling us it was taking four caregivers.
Wow.
So it's about building that relationship. Even if they have dementia, the residents remember our caregivers because they're there every day. So the relationships still matter.
Yeah, probably also sticking with the routine, like you mentioned with Mark's experience and journey, just being,
Absolutely.
it has to be done in the right order, otherwise it's not going to happen.
Mhm.
I have a quick question, if you don't mind. Oh, go ahead, Cole.
I just want to throw one more thing in is that we can't de-escalate, and this goes for people that are cognitively intact and those living with dementia if we have a crowd. So if you have a resident that's escalated in their behavioral expression, they're very upset, trying to calm them when there's a crowd, they're not going to be able to calm. So getting everyone else out of that immediate area and just have one or two people there can also help bring the intensity of the situation down automatically. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Dan.
No, it's okay. No, it's hard to create a calm environment in a crowd, I would assume, right? But yeah, I was just curious, being kind of, learning about this today, in depth for one of the first times. I've read about it a lot, but I'm curious, with Mark, it sounds like he was starting to show some initial signs of this condition around 52 years old. He was officially diagnosed at 56. Like, what is the typical rate of progression that you see? Is it different for everyone? And then kind of secondarily, are there medications out there that are specific to these conditions? And are there any ways to like test genetics to see if if in Mark's children, for example, if they're predisposed to this potentially at some point? So I know that's a long question, but just curious.
Let's try to break it apart. So there are
Progression and then
Yeah, progression,
the
medications, and then
medication.
maybe genetic testing. Yeah, I apologize. That's where my head was
so
going.
no worries. Frontotemporal dementia does progress more rapidly typically than a typical like Alzheimer's disease where you have a long, slow progression. These individuals do progress typically faster. They're diagnosed younger. As far as risk factors, genetics is one of the biggest risk factors for developing any type of dementia. Um, Things you can do would be anything that keeps your heart healthy is going to keep your brain healthy. So those Mediterranean and DASH diets, they now have the mind diet for the brain specifically. Exercise, staying connected was to me what COVID taught us about all dementias. If you want to slow the progression or decrease your risk of developing a dementia. It's stay connected socially, get out, learn new things, not things you're great at all the time.
Yeah.
So my dad's like, I'll never get dementia. I do the crossword puzzle every day. And I'm like, so now let's change it up and do something with numbers. Let's learn a new language.
Yeah.
It's just about creating new neural pathways. Um, Anything y'all would like to add to
No,
that,
no
Michelle
medications.
or
Like there's nothing approved for
not right,
this
not
capacity.
for
Yeah.
most of the dementias. There are medications that can slow the
Right.
progression. So
Alzheimer's,
functional status,
ARSF. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
gets preserved, which helps with autonomy and self-esteem and self-assurance. But right now, there isn't a medication that actually treats or prevents dementia, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Absolutely. And big shout out to Viking Pure for creating spaces like this for us to learn together and to explore. Like y'all are already crushing it by giving us products that are safe for our residents. So to add on that you're giving education free across the world is huge. So
Oh, man,
thank y'all
that's
for providing the space.
if we could
Absolutely.
be a steward of anything in this space, I think our mission is first, and that's obviously to continue to serve and to remove toxic chemicals from the environment. But if we can be, in addition to that, a pillar of just best practices and how we reimagine care across all of the different platforms, we really do hope to be that. And the gratitude goes both ways here. We're very thankful for each of you to join and share this story about Mark. We look forward to getting it out there so that we can continue to hopefully just improve and leave this world a better place than we got it. So
Absolutely. Yes, thank you for joining us. And to those listening in, we truly appreciate your time and engagement today. The replay from today's discussion will be available later, and I'll be sending an email out with that, and we'll include the deck and slides from today as well. So please feel free to respond to that email with any additional questions you have, and I'll be sure that they get to Courtney, Michelle, or Cole accordingly. And yes, thanks for joining us again.
have a great day, everyone.
All right, have a good
Thank
one.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.